If you're like me, you were probably excited to finally hear about Pokemon Brilliant Diamond or Shining Pearl, and then had your expectations completely destroyed after watching the trailers, and then pushed even more into the ground with cleats after playing it while having absolutely no expectations or hope anymore. Then you're probably completely disappointed. An exact one-to-one remake of the game's world is not something that was ideal for me. There's a lot more issues I have with the game, but that's an entirely different subject compared to what I'm wanting to do. If we take a look at Ruby and Sapphire and compare it to its remakes of Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, we can see there was a clear improvements with graphics and sizing in the game. The buildings looked much nicer and the graphics were vastly improved. There's still a certain ratio of the original game there, but it has a much nicer and cozier feeling. The trees look nicer, the grass textures don't look like they were just purely snaps of the grid. We can see grass placed in front of the houses as well. Now if we take a look at Diamond and Pearl and compare them to Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, it's a near one-to-one remake with just a higher poly count out of the 3D models. The dirt pathing is placed exactly the same. There are some flowers and some small blades of grass placed here and there, but it's not really significant. So to start this off, I created a new project with URP and imported Pro Builder to begin making the base of the town. I made sure to import Pro Builder samples as well to avoid any unwarranted issues with the materials. And of course, deleting the default assets. Instead of creating the terrain or base of the map, I wanted to start by creating the houses first. There are two types of houses, one with two chimneys and one without any. I didn't want the houses to be an exact 1-1 ratio like BDSP did, so I decided to wing it and see what I could come up with. I tried to take an account for the contents of the inside of the homes, so I went ahead and worked with those to get the general idea how big the exterior of the houses should be. I went ahead and assumed the player would be slightly under 2 meters tall or 2 blocks worth. I'm not really too sure what happened at this point, but I started detailing the house before finishing the blockout stage. As I was doing this, I realized I got carried away from what I was really supposed to be doing, so I went back to the foundation of the house. Not liking what I've done so far, I decided to hide what I already worked on and use actual cabin houses as references instead of using the game assets. So I went to my good friend the Google Images and looked at cabins. After doing in-depth and thorough research, or procrastinating, while watching cabin building videos, I decided to get back to work. With the base model of the house completed, I decided to give it some textures to see how it would look. After going through at least 5 different textures, I've come across nothing but very bizarre looking ones so far. I found a decent board texture, but it's not seamless at all. So I decided to edit it so all the seams will disappear like King Henry's wives. But I decided to continue my search for the holy grail of textures, and eventually I did find one. I finished up the first house for now. While it's not perfect, it'll do good as a placement until I can create some additional textures for it, and maybe even go as far as adding some more detail to the asset itself. Now I'll begin working on the terrain. I didn't want to go as far as to make it square like the original games, but I wanted to make it more open world feeling, like there was space for the player to move around. I tried finding some concept images or any images at all that might be related to the anime, but for the time being, the only ones I could find are fan-made and the actual town from the game. So I ended up trying to mix Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire with Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. While modifying the terrain, I wanted to add some trees to get the feel that the town was surrounded by a forest like it is in the games. I downloaded this asset pack to get from Humble Bundle and imported it into my project, and to no surprise, I was having error textures. I tried out a different asset I had in my library, and it worked out just fine, so I'll be using the Mountain Trees package instead. Before adding trees, I wanted to craft the terrain more and paint some of it. I felt it would be better than having all the trees in the way. After placing trees, I decided to place more floral in front of the house and begin working on a pathing within the town. At this point, I decided to search for more references to use, and I managed to find Dawn's house and an actual picture from the anime of Twinleaf Town. Once I viewed the images, the house was a bit off, and by a bit off I mean very off compared to the anime, but compared to the game I was more or less the same. I did go into the right direction when it came to spacing out the houses and adding a fence and hills to the scene. Just like the original Twinleaf Town, I wanted to add a small lake, so I used the water shader from a previous video to add it to my scene. As I was playing around with the values, I noticed something kinda cool with the water. Once done with the water, I went back to the task before, adding more trees. After viewing the art for Twinleaf Town, I noticed that the roofs were different colors on some of the houses, so I decided to change the colors on some of the roofs. I also noticed Dawn's house is completely different compared to the rest of the houses shown, so I'm going to attempt to make her house look unique and separate from the rest. Mostly satisfied with the house, I decided to work on surrounding parts with a fence and some foliage. After I was more or less done with the scene and placing down some trees, I decided to add a giant Pikachu model so it can look over the town from any evil Pokemon that may want to harm the people. One of the final things to do is make the height and normal maps of each texture so they pop out. With that being done, I polished the terrain a little bit, modified the post-processing volumes, and adjusted the lighting and changed the skybox. Thank you all for watching, and all the resources that were used will be provided in the video description.